listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. Unfortunately, Farhan can't be with us today, so you're going to have to make do with me, Adam Keys, and Monty. So, Monty, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
I'm well, thank you. It's been a nice weekend. I mean, it's been annoying that the international break's on and we've got no football really to talk about. But no, all in all, it's been a good week. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, pretty much the same. It's been one of those rare weekends I've had in the house doing jobs, so it would have been nice for like a full Premier League calendar. Even yesterday, it was one of those, when you look to see what game's on and you look, and I couldn't even be bothered turning any of the games on. So let's get ourselves started today with some quick fire questions. So are you ready to go? So first up,
I am.
Of the Arsenal players on international duty, which one has caught your eye the most during this break?
I mean, to be honest, I say Declan Rice. He was great. I mean, England weren't too great, but Declan Rice has been good. Saliba they played Gibraltar. I'm gonna go with Declan Rice.
And secondly, if Gabriel Jesus plays against Argentina midweek, should he start against Brentford at the weekend?
I don't see why not. I don't see. Depends if he plays 90 minutes. If he plays the full 90, and it's a very close, like really tight, exhausting game, potentially not. But if he comes off after like 70 minutes, he should be grand.
And finally, yes or no, the final question I have for you is, does Leandro Trossard deserve a start at the weekend? At the time of recording, he has just scored for Belgium.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to check.
Yes, I'm going to go yes.
As is. So yeah, it's a yes from Monty for Trossard starting. Today's episode, as there's no game, we decided we would do a bit of a run through, some comparisons between this year, last year, where we're at as a team, and just have an overall look at the team as a whole and what we've improved on, who's been the standout players, how our new signings have done, and what we can expect for the next few months after a fairly large chunk of the season that's gone already. So one of the main things I think we've been criticised for this year is saying that we haven't really got started. A lot of people have been complaining about the kind of football we're playing, saying that we haven't been as good as last season. However, at this point last year, we were only 3 points better off, and we were absolutely electric. I think that's the key thing is our football was frenetic, it was chaotic, it was beautiful to watch, and it just provided so much entertainment every time. You couldn't wait to watch Arsenal play. Whereas this year, we're definitely a much more grown-up team. But do you think we have started slowly? Or do you think this is just a misconception based around kind of energy levels and the eye test versus actual results?
I think it's a mix of all. I think as well we need to compare the fixtures that we've had this season compared to last season. I mean, this season we've played Man United, we've played Spurs, we've played Newcastle, we've played Man City.
Chelsea.
2 of those games we won, one of them we drew, and one of them we lost. And we played Chelsea. But I'm going to be real with you. I'm not scared of Chelsea anymore. They just don't. I don't go into those games anymore with a bit of fear. But we had compared to last season. I think last season we had a bit of an easier schedule, if I'm going to be honest, as well. Contextually, last season people didn't even expect us to make top 4, so I think people were setting up differently against us. They just didn't expect us to do what we did to them. So I'm just trying to remember the first sort of games we had last season. It was Crystal Palace away, tough game. That was a tough game. That was a huge game when we won that 2-0. Leicester City at home. That's when Saliba scored his own goal, and the crowd all got behind him. That was a great game. We had Bournemouth away, Fulham at home, Aston Villa at home, Then we had Man United at home. So a lot of home games. Then we had Brentford away, won that. Then we had Tottenham at home, won that. And then that pretty much brings us to the same time as what we were now, pretty much. And we had Arsenal at home, and that was a very close game.
Arsenal at home.
So yeah, I think sorry.
Who was that last one? You said Arsenal at home.
Liverpool.
Liverpool,
sorry,
yeah.
Liverpool. It was sorry. I say Arsenal. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, we had Liverpool at home. So yeah, I think on a fixture wise, we've had a different season this year, and considering some last season, I think in the summer in the Premier League as a whole got a lot stronger this season. Just with other clubs like the Newcastle's, Aston Villa, Brighton dropped off quite a bit actually this season. They sold one too many players maybe. Then you've got other sort of contenders that are popping up out of nowhere as well. It's just a lot tougher, and I think this season people are playing more honest to Arsenal. They understand that we are a challenger. We are a serious club now, and we're not going to throw in those sort of old traits where we could beat Man United and beat Chelsea, and then lose to Sheffield United. We don't really do that anymore. So we people play us differently. Yes, we are 3 points behind from what we were, but then in context of the Premier League, we're still only a point behind.
Only a point behind.
If exactly. So it's not that bad because the whole league is difficult now. There's a lot of depth across it. There are maybe 5 teams within the league who aren't really at Premier League standard, but the rest will give you a good game. Like look at Wolves the other day, beating Spurs quite well as well. They pretty much had that game. Chelsea Man City game. Chelsea are sitting 10th, but yet that was an incredible game. Crystal Palace have been defensively solid and hard to break down. They haven't really scored much. Then you get the Brightons and West Hams that can frustrate anyone. So I think we've had a pretty much on par season from last season. I just think with context and potential injuries as well, I think if Urian Timber comes in, was ready for the whole season, I don't think we would have drew against Tottenham. I just don't think we would have. I don't think they would have been able to get the spaces available. I think would have dominated sort of the middle of the park a bit more. Maybe the Newcastle game. It's just one of those. But no, I'm happy with the progress so far compared to last season. With last season, we were ecstatic with where we were because we didn't expect it. Whereas this season, I think a lot more pressure has been put on because of what we did last season. So we might be looking at it with a more critique eye rather than sort of just pure like joy of being where we are. So no, I would say it's on par. What about you?
I agree with what you're saying completely. I think the point about the league becoming stronger, I think what we've seen is I think the bottom half's got weaker and the top half's got much stronger. So the Luton, Sheffield United and Burnley, I think if they were in the Championship this year, they wouldn't come up. I think there's probably 5 teams in the Championship better than them, and they're nowhere near the standard of the teams that went down. So if you look at the likes of Leeds, who were awful for a large part of the season, got some really good players in that team. The likes of, when you look at them last year, the Sinisteras, Somerville, Nanto, those kind of players, they would walk into any of those teams at the bottom of the table this year. And again, Leicester, lots of good players. You have Madison, Drewsby, all and so on in that Leicester team. And those teams right down at the bottom don't have that. So I think what we'll see is those teams are going to get a lot of big defeats. But at the same time, I think Liverpool have got stronger. Chelsea have got stronger. Newcastle have got stronger. Aston Villa are looking very, very good. They went out, bought well in the summer. And this is the thing with Douglas Luiz is people say, if the player forces the move. For me, this isn't a player forcing a team from a mid-table side. This is a Villa side that, in my opinion, are pretty balanced right from the back, right down the sides, and through the middle as well. And they've got a good manager in Unai Emery. They have got a pretty good structure as well. They've got, is it Monchi, their director of football? So they're a club that knows how to recruit.
Yeah, they've also got rich owners as well.
Yeah, very and rich owners. So they're a side for me that I think Brighton, were always someone that I thought Brighton are doing the Southampton thing. They're getting good talents, they're developing them and selling them on at a profit. that only works so long because you can buy good talent, but you're relying on them adapting. And I think this year we've seen that some of the signings they've made maybe haven't adapted in the way that Caicedo did, for example, or Alexis McAllister, or those other players. And I think what Villa have over Brighton is they're a much bigger club to begin with. They've got much deeper pockets, and they've got a real structure in place, and they've got quality. Whereas I think a lot of last year with Brighton, they were really well coached, but you had players like Dunk playing it out from the back effortlessly. Aaron Still coming in goal. He kind of came from nowhere, but he's not a young keeper. And you're relying on those players continuing to play at that level, but you need one or two stars that then lift them all up. So I do think this season, quality wise, the top 10 are all very good. And I think we're starting to see Chelsea come back. I know you're saying you're not scared of them. For me, I'm watching them quite closely because I'm looking at the players. I think they massively overrate Enzo, but the potential's there. But I want to see, I'm judging players on what they're doing, not what they can potentially do in 2 or 3 years. And I think that is something this year we're seeing a lot more quality in the league. Just the money spent again in the Premier League. But I think one of the big things that you've kind of hit the nail on the head with is expectation with Arsenal. Last year, everyone was writing us off. And if you look at our signings last summer, Jesus and Zinchenko, but we took a punt on Fabio Vieira. And that was what we went into the new season with. And we were already pretty thin. So this year, obviously spending over 200 million, then the January signings along with that finishing second. I think people want electric football. They want all the nice things. But the reality is for me, I would rather win and be in amongst it than play some really beautiful football and get beat 2 or 3-1, because you get beat 3-1 and you have 80% of the ball, you play beautiful football. You don't remember that football. What you remember is being beat 3-1, and you come away in a bad mood. So for me, I agree with you. I think the injuries have played a big part, and I think they've played a big part with fluidity. But all in all, I think we're in a good position right now to really kick on for this next part. But just on this topic of injuries, just give me your thoughts on them. You've obviously mentioned Jury and Timber, but one of the things that we've had is, aside from Timber, who's been long term, we've had a lot of niggling injuries. So Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard, Jesus, that front four have all missed games.
Smith Rowe as well.
Smith Rowe.
Party.
Party's missed a lot. So even Zinchenko as well. So we've had a lot of issues there. And that's something that it's kind of difficult to get round that. So give me your thoughts on injuries as a whole and how you think they've affected us.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why when you asked at the start sort of how our season's gone, I don't think we've done worse because the sheer amount of injuries that we've had, and it's like you said, it's the little niggles. It's like missing Erdegaard in the Newcastle game. Huge loss. That's a big game. And we need him. We didn't have Partey either available. So we're missing two of our starting midfielders. And that was where the game was won and lost, was in that midfield battle. Like we've not had the depth in sort of the European competitions to be able to rotate with certain players because they've been injured as well. Vieira's had some niggles. Ben White's had a couple of niggles every now and again, so he's been forced to sort of step out or go out of position. We've had to bring someone else out of position. Partey again, or Carty's just been ghosting pretty much this whole season, which has been frustrating. We had Edin Nketiah was out for the other game a while ago, and we had to have Trossard, but I mean that worked out luckily. That worked out for us. Trossard really yeah, Trossard's been out at one point. So we've had a lot of injuries. And I definitely think they have impacted us, especially when you look at the key games. Not so much the smaller games. I'll say smaller games, it's a bit rude to say them, but games that we expect to win. The games where we were the 50-50s or there's a chance that we could lose, such as the Tottenham game, because they were flying at the start of the season when they had Maddison in their team. Crazy. But then you look at their season now, they lost Maddison, lost Van der Ven, and they've lost 2 on a bounce. They were undefeated. They've lost 2 on a bounce. So it's huge. It's huge what a couple of injuries can do. and then you go to the Newcastle game. That I think that was won and lost because of Martin Odegaard not being available, and the fact that he was injured because of concussion from a training. That was so annoying. But yeah, no, I'm not. Injuries have affected us. I think we know what we need to do in January, but I do think we've got a deep enough squad, and I think we filled in those holes in summer. Maybe not 100% of them, maybe sort of 80%, and we missed maybe one position, which for me is that probably left 8 position. We went for the kind of just wrong player, in my opinion. But we filled in the gaps that we needed to. So, for instance, we brought in Timber, who was meant to actually be the guy to step in, and he got injured straight away. So we had to go back to what we were last season, which isn't actually a bad thing. It's not necessarily a case of an old pro came in and a new player that we've just brought in who was meant to be amazing has just flopped. So we kind of went back to what we're used to, which I kind of think helped maybe a little bit. But I do think Timber just offers things going forward. So I'm not too concerned, but there have been key issues on the injuries, which have accosted us, and that's why when at the start of the pod you said, has it affected us? I don't think I'm happy where we are now, considering the injuries with context. What about you?
Yeah, I think the injuries have affected our fluidity in attacking positions. So with the front four, the Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, and Jesus, I think having Jesus drifting either side, coming forward and allowing that space in behind, that creates so many problems in itself. And I think that's where it has affected us. So we're currently we're not creating the chances we did last season. We're not scoring goals at the same flurry, but at the same time, we've got a rock solid defense. So when you look at where we have benefited, it's that triangle: Declan Rice, William Saliba, Gabriel. Those three have been rock solid, and even Rice has been able to play as a left 8. And I think Jorginho deserves a lot of credit because he's someone that gets a lot of stick from the Arsenal fan base. As you know, I really like Jorginho, but I fully understand why people don't. I think I'm always more forgiving of a player who, if there is a weakness in their game that we know about, and he's being overrun in midfield, I don't see that as a Jorginho mistake as such. What I get frustrated about is players making silly mistakes. Whereas we know if you put Jorginho in a midfield with Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, and Conor Gallagher, those three are just going to run and run all day. And that's where someone like Jorginho will be found out. However, you put him in a midfield where we've got a lot of the ball, or the game against City, which was very, very tactical, Jorginho will thrive. So for me, I know exactly where I stand with Jorginho, and that's part of why I like him so much. I know what all the strengths are. I know what his weaknesses are. And I think sometimes when you have a player who the weakness is legs, you put runners at either side of him, and I think that's where Declan Rice is really probably working overtime for in a lot of games. So you're talking about a player that you're asking to play a bit like Steven Gerrard, however, and but at the same time they're having to get back and cover like Mascherano. So when Gerrard was playing as a real attacking player at Liverpool, Benitez didn't trust him. He ended up putting him practically as a 10 and right up beside Torres, and he didn't have to do the same level of work that Declan Rice does. But I think for me, the big thing is fluidity with our attacking game. And part of that, what comes from fluidity is understanding. It's when players play together, they start to get those telepathic understandings. And when we've played this season, we start to get a few games together, then one of them goes down. And it's players that Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard, they're three players that barely had an injury for the last 2 years. Saka's never had any. So I think we are seeing a greater intensity in the game, and that's probably down to an increased quality across the league. But for me, where injuries have affected us has been fluidity, but I think that also is something that we need to praise, in that we've still been able to get the results with those injuries and without that fluidity. Because
definitely,
like, how many times have we said we lose a couple of players and we fall apart?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and look to last season as well. I think we were the most unchanged 11 of the whole league. I think we only changed the starting, like we had like the most unchanged 11s, like something like 13 or 14 unchanged 11s, Whereas now we must be up there. I don't think we're the most changed because like you've got loads of people with loads of injuries like Sheffield United, but we must be up there because like
Well,
I
actually,
don't remember Martinelli, Saka, and Jesus playing up front much this season. Maybe
yeah,
one game, two at the top of my head.
this season only
Probably
Newcastle
New
have
Nottingham
more
Forest.
injuries than us right now.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's.
And
But what I think was pretty alarming, I saw a table of injuries the other day, and it was the number of injuries right the way across the board. It's one of those. It's easy to bemoan injuries as an Arsenal fan because we do always seem to have injuries, but now I think we're just seeing a lot more consistency across the board where everyone's picking up a lot of injuries.
is that down to the just sheer scheduling though? Do you think and sheer
Could
overworking
be.
the players?
I think it's probably a mix of scheduling and intensity. So the game's got more intense. There's more sprinting. There's more pressing. Whereas
Mm.
I think there's always been a lot of games played, but I think the game was a lot more physical in terms of like contact injuries and stuff, which actually, when you know yourself, you get kicked, you get back up. Whereas you pull your hamstring, you have to sit the next one out. You can play through a bruise. Your ankles can be in pain because they've been kicked. You can still run, you can still pass, you can still do all those things and still get through a game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the game's changed. So if you look back like Arsenal in the 70s, Liam Brady played like 78 games one season, which was insane. But the game was very different. They were hacked down, but the number of sprints and the
Yeah.
intensity was different. But yeah. But do you think like obviously I think there's fluidity, but do you think our style of play has changed because of injuries? Or do you think Arteta has made a deliberate ploy to change our style of play to control games?
I don't necessarily think he's actually he's changed our style of play per se. It's just because of the profiles are slightly different. Especially with that because I feel like Arteta's trying to he's really trying to make this Havertz transfer work, and he's really trying to find how to get him and bring in the best of him. So I think he's altering it so much, but the back line is exactly the same. There's not a single bit of difference from last season, and that's something we've seen over the last 3 seasons. We've now just got a lot more fluid and a lot more solid with it, and that's why we're the joint best defense in the league. They're just solid. It depends who. If Tomiyasu or Zinchenko goes up front in the middle, then the backs just sort of shift, and then or they completely bring the two there, and the centre back spread out, and then Declan Rice drops in, or Jorginho or whoever's does six will drop in and make a back three, and then the two fullbacks go forward. Same thing, it's exactly the same. Midfield, largely the same. Still got the double pivot with Zinchenko when he comes inside. You've still got Jorginho or Rice, or whoever's playing that position party. They look to exploit the midfield, and you've got the fullbacks overloading. The only difference to this season, I think, is that left eight. That left eight in that 10 role. They're just very different, and we've seen a couple of changes this season. I mean, when Trossard was playing the other day with Havertz, that's the best I thought we saw of Havertz actually, because Havertz played more a traditional like shadow striker role, and then we had Trossard playing a sort of a false nine. Very similar positions, different in sort of fundamentally. Like one will kind of drop into spaces, and one sort of holds and stays at area and pops up when he needs to. Whereas one sort of constantly is trying to be moving, shifting, and going across. And that's sort of the Trossard. He was just shifting, moving, and moving. So yeah, we I think up front we've changed the most. I think the back line, the sort of the middle of the park is pretty much the same. I don't think we've seen much difference. It's more, from my personal opinion and what I've seen, I think it's more Arteta's just really trying to make that Havertz deal work. Hope it does, but yeah, that's where I'm seeing a lot of change. There's not as much, like you said, fluidity. There's not as much speed, I think is the word I'd use, up front. Like the last season, we were seeing 3-touch passes, like from backline midfield to up to scoring a goal. It was like goal, and now we're seeing pass, draw, pass. Lack of like creative, like pass, try and draw him out, bring him in, bring this guy back, draw him up, flip it over, come like. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit more convoluted, I'd say. It's not as streamlined as what it was. So that's the only difference I'm seeing is up front in that final third position. But is it down to tactically, or is it purely down to the players not executing what they're being told? I don't know.
One of the interesting things is because you mentioned Havertz and Xhaka. I'm just looking at their numbers and their involvement per game. So Xhaka last year had 53 and a half touches a game on average in the Premier League, specifically in the Prem. This year, Havertz is averaging 32. So that's over 20 touches per game in the league, less than what Xhaka had last season in that left 8 position, which is a big, big difference. Mm-hmm. And that is something where when you look at that involvement, you've got someone who's clearly shown for the ball much more, wants to be involved a lot more. And even at that was a big drop off from every previous year. Granit Xhaka was someone that could easily average 100 touches a game. And then last year, he was, by his standards, pretty uninvolved in games. His role was very much that advanced state and a lot of good work done in kind of the final third of the pitch, whereas this year we're not quite seeing that from Havertz. But just on that, because it was something that I wanted to discuss, was new signings. What do you think Havertz needs to do to, I guess, assert himself? Because we're seeing the good work off the ball, but we've discussed this before in the pod. He is a £65 million player. He's someone that we've invested a hell of a lot of money into. And the point of signing him was supposedly to add goals and assists. You can add intelligent off-the-ball players for a fraction of that price. And ultimately, Havertz is going to be judged on his price tag for his impact in kind of deciding games and helping us win them, as opposed to stopping us from losing them. So what do you think he needs to do to take himself to that next level?
Yeah, no, I think the easy answer is to say score. But I think realistically, for him, I just want to see him more proactive. I just feel like when he's on the pitch, like, he can take the long balls down and all this kind of stuff. But like you said, look at the touches. Like Xhaka, when last season, Xhaka was predominantly used to be a sort of a holding midfielder, and he could do the box-to-box work, but he was better at the defensive side rather than the attacking side. He always had the strong left foot on him, but it was more the defensive side. So he used to show for the ball more. Whereas Havertz, we keep seeing just hanging up high at the pitch, not really getting involved. I just want to see him more proactive, get in between the lines, connect the dots from Rice to him to the wing, getting those movements, getting those situations. Yes, we want him to score more, but it's easier said than done. But I haven't really seen him create anything. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not being a dictator in the midfield. If you're going to play that advanced left 8 role, it's a big role. You've got to be defensively involved. You've got to be solid. You've got to not let people get around you. You've got to make sure you make the right choice, whether we go wide or in the middle. You have to make that first choice. And then you also have to be able to have the long diagonal ball on you, because if you're receiving a ball in your halfway line and you've got Saka bombing it on your diagonal and he's 1-on-1 and he's already gone past his man, you've got to be able to release that ball. And that's what I'm not seeing from Havertz. He's just not creating enough. And it's odd, because obviously when you think of Havertz, and especially at his time as Leverkusen, he was one of the most creative people on the pitch in football at that time. He was just creating and seeing angles that people were just like, what? Where is this coming from? He was scoring left, right and centre. And I'm not expecting him to do those same sort of numbers. But I think the main thing is just proactiveness. Like you said, like if he's only averaging 30 touches a game, what are you doing? Because I know for a fact if Emil Smith-Rowe came on, like I bet if you compared Emil Smith-Rowe's cameo appearances, he's probably got more than that. He's probably got more than that. Because
I'm
that's
pulling just
up
the numbers as you're talking. But yeah, I do think
literally,
that's a major thing.
Yeah. He needs to be on the ball more, show his face more, and show the confidence to receive the ball, and just give the players confidence, because I sometimes feel like he doesn't inspire confidence in that midfield. Like if he inspires the fans, he's definitely inspiring the players. Do you know what I mean? And if he's getting on the ball and he's willing to take those tricky balls and in those tricky areas, and because he's so big. He's quite hard. He can't really turn. He hasn't got low centre of gravity like an Emil Smith-Rowe or like a Fabio Vieira or like going old school like the Santi Cazorlas. He hasn't got that. But he needs to be able to create the space. He needs to move more in terms of getting into spaces rather than just sort of holding his back onto a guy. That's the only thing I can think we need from him, really. And I know it's a shortcut answer to say you just score more, but assists. You're a midfielder. We don't expect you to bag 20 goals a season. But as a midfielder for Arsenal, you should definitely be assisting double figures. You should be. It doesn't matter what midfielder you are. You should be pushing double figure assists.
Do you think that part of the criticism of Havertz is down to how well Maddison and Szoboszlai have started?
100%. 100%. I mean, Maddison, for the price he went, I'm jealous. I'll be real with you right now. Like, Maddison he's got to be up there for one of the signings of the season. He's completely transformed. You're talking about a Spurs team that lost a world-class striker who is continuing to prove that he is world-class in Germany and broke records at the start. He's an incredible player. So to replace him is crazy. It's crazy hard. You can't just replace a Harry Kane. It's impossible. But Maddison's came in and given him a complete different dynamic. And when I watched him, so I've seen a couple of Tottenham games this season, especially the one at the Emirates, Maddison was dictating the game. He was openly calling for the ball, like, get me the ball, running forward, charging down, falling the ball over there, passing it over here. Then you compare that, if you did a mirror of him and Maddison, you don't see the same body expressions, the confidence. Like, Maddison oozes confidence. Havertz doesn't. So I think it's completely fair. I mean, Havertz costs more, and yet he's done less. And you've got Szoboszlai. We were linked with him for a few years. Great player. He hasn't lit up the league as much as I would say Maddison. Great signing, though. Again, he's hungry. He's getting in that midfield. He's dominant on the ball. He's able to hold people off, but he's actively showing for the ball. He's not just waiting for the ball to come near him. He's actually going to play and going, like, give me the ball, pass me the ball, get me the ball now. Like, and that's something to just not see him have it. So I would completely agree with you in saying that he's got the criticism because of other transfers that have gone for less money, have done more. 100%.
It's funny with that one because I see Mason Mount getting the same criticism from United fans because, and a lot of it is directed at what Maddison and Szoboszlai are doing. And I know Szoboszlai hasn't exactly been scoring loads, but he's been playing very, very well. And I think the goals will come with him. He's playing for Jurgen Klopp, who I think Klopp's probably the best attacking coach in the world. I believe that for a long time. I think if you want pure kind of unadulterated attacking football, Klopp is the man to coach that. He will play the most energetic, most exciting football out there. He will leave it open at the back, and we've seen this season with Liverpool. Their XG for conceded goals is much higher than ours, and although they haven't conceded many goals, they are conceding a lot of shots. Their defenders are making a lot of tackles, and Van Dijk's not used to having to do that. He's usually oozes calmness, and he's having to do a lot more work because people are running through their midfield. And until they sign a six, that will continue to happen. So I think what we all know about Liverpool is they're going to score a lot of goals this season. And with that, Szoboszlai will improve his goal scoring. But obviously this season, the other big change has been Champions League football. How do you think we've adapted to the Champions League as a competition in its own right, and B, the squad management that comes with playing those extra games at a higher intensity as opposed to the Europa where you heavily rotate?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the question at the start of the pod as well. I mean, we're 3 points behind from where we were last season, and last season we didn't even play in Europe. So I think we've done it quite well. I mean, yes, we've lost a game. We lost to Lens. I think the Lens game was just purely atmosphere. We just weren't ready, and we went into that game thinking we were going to win automatically, and we didn't. I think we've handled it pretty well. I think there were moments where maybe Arteta wanted to rotate more, but he hasn't been able to. For instance, like the likes of I don't know, Fabio Vieira has not been available. He's been off for like a game or two. Emerson Smith-Rowe not being available. He's been off for a game or two. Edin Nketiah was out for a little bit. Those ones I think have stopped him from rotating as much as he would have liked, because I think he wants to get different options for the club and see what he's trying. Because I think he's trying to find the right partnerships and pairings for alternative teams and how they work and stuff. I've been happy with the rotation. I for instance, like Saka's come off a few times. I mean, he had his first non-start in like, what was it, 72 games?
More than that, it's like
Crazy.
87, I think,
Crazy.
86, 87.
Yeah, it's just mental to start that amount of games on the trot at such a young age. So yeah, we've been able to get him off. We've been able to switch Martinelli out every now and again, get Trossard in. I mean, Nketiah's been forced in but he's also been able to do a job. He's been able to come out for a rest when he's had to, with Trossard coming in. Rice has been rested every now and again, but Rice is a unicorn. Rice just seems to be like a Tesla factory. He's just got batteries and batteries and batteries, and he just keeps going. Saliba and Gabriel have been able to rotate every now and again, with Kivior coming in, and like Tomiyasu. And I love Tomiyasu for that reason. Tomiyasu is like, it's just Tomiyasu and Ben White are like some of my favourite defenders we got, and I know they don't get as much credit as they do, but it's the fact that they can play anywhere across that front that back line. Tomiyasu specifically, he can play left back, right back, centre back, left, right centre back. Ben White can only really do right centre back or right back, but he can still do the job. Do you know what I mean? And we've got that versatility. So no, I think we're handling it well. I think maybe on the League Cup game, when we lost to West Ham, we were more hit by it. It was more we didn't take it seriously, because you look at our lineup and you compare to their lineup was fully strong, 100%. They wanted to go for it. We didn't. We missed some key players as well. And we stepped out of that. We basically stepped out of that cup because we've got the FA Cup, we've got Champions League, which is the first time we've been in it for 7, 8 years. Which is good to be back in there. We obviously want to have a deep run in that. So I think coming forward, especially with the months that are coming up, I think this international break, although it's annoying, I think it's coming at a perfect time. I think we'll probably get a lot of players back. And I'm coming up to the crucial part of December, specifically December, because everyone knows in English football, December is like an absolute killer of a month. It's just a game every 3 days, and you don't even get any training in between it. It's like just a light session just to make sure you haven't pulled anything. So I think we're all right. I think we're all right. What about you? Is there anything that you've noticed maybe someone hasn't changed in as much, or you would like to have seen more of someone, or how do you feel about it?
I think, honestly, I completely agree with your point about, I think Arteta would have liked to rotate more. So I think Declan Rice would never have played against West Ham, for example. Those kind of instances where he's played Jorginho at times 3 games a week at 31, that would never have been planned at the start of the season. So I think Jorginho is a player that would have been coming in. The only player I think that probably deserves more game time, but I just don't see where it would come, is Jakub Kivior. I think anytime he's come in, he's been tremendous. Mm-hmm. But honestly, when I look at that team, I think everyone's had a part to play. Everyone's got minutes, and everyone's contributing this year. And that's something that we haven't been able to say for a long time. And when you look at the players that have been out, I think them coming back and hopefully staying fit will be in a good position. But I think we've looked back enough now. So for the second half of the show, let's have a look at what's coming up and kind of where we go from here. So we are now past the halfway point of the show. And one of the things, it's now time to look forward to what we've got coming up. We've discussed a lot of where we've been, where we were, but let's talk a bit about where we're going. So we have a host of players away on international duty, and we've talked a lot about injuries. However, Odegaard's expected to be back after the break. Gabriel Jesus is expected to play against Argentina midweek. He looks very acrobatic in the Brazil pictures that are going around. And Trossard's been away with Belgium, looks very fit, very sharp. And we're waiting to hear more about Emile Smith-Rowe. The updates there have been very quiet. And we know Thomas Partey's long-term. We're remaining hopeful about Jurriën Timber. But Jesus and Odegaard coming back, those two give us a fairly healthy looking squad and suddenly beefs out the team a lot more. So give me your thoughts on what the inclusion of those two within the team will do and what you expect to see with the two of them back.
I mean, you're talking about arguably two of our best players on the team, creatively and just pure effort. I mean, the thing about Jesus and Nketiah up front, Jesus just has that about him. I mean, Nketiah, he's great. He can do a job. I love him as much as sort of anyone else. But Jesus has that class about him. He can convert things that just shouldn't even be there. He will create opportunities because he kind of adds fear into a defender. Nketiah doesn't really instill that yet. And to be honest, with the games that we've got coming up, with them sort of coming back from injuries, they're not the toughest. But nonetheless, we need to play it honest. So we've got Brentford away. That'll be quite a tough game. It's a London derby. Brentford at home, they're always quite good. They've always given us a tough run in as a sort of the last few years. Then we've got Lens at home. That should be a sort of a run in for a lot of them to get back on board, and I'm sure the players are going to be angry to get back and get a result of that. Then we've got Wolves. Then we've got Luton. And that gives them a good running because then we start getting into some difficult games. So in that December period, we've got Aston Villa coming up, PSV away, Brighton, Liverpool, West Ham away, West Ham at home, Fulham away, Palace. So we've got some difficult games coming up. So I think having those players back is crucial, and I think having those players back with enough games to get warmed up for those big games is also crucial because I think it allows them to get sort of back on page with their fellow players. And like I said, just talking to two of our best players. Like I said earlier, I think Odegaard not playing against Newcastle was the reason we didn't win that game or even get a point out of it. Well, I mean, we could have got a point out of it if VAR wasn't so crooked, but we move. Jesus, it's just great to have Jesus back. I always just feel better when Jesus is on the lineup. I don't know about you, but when I see Jesus starting,
100%.
for some reason, I just feel better. I feel like there is a goal that can come out of anywhere. And just his off the ball movement, it's just amazing. He leads by example. He can go across the whole front three. So I don't know if Martinelli has to step out, Saka has to step out. He can do that role perfectly. And then we just bring Nketiah on, or Trossard, or whoever you want to play up there. No, I think that it's crucial to have them back. And like I said, they make us better. They just make us better.
Yeah, one of the things I think with the Lens game is really crucial because we win that, we've topped the group, we're through, then that gives us a breather for the PSV game because the last thing we want is to be going to PSV needing a win to top the group. So that is always a fear, or even that potentially we needed that. We're virtually through now, but we want to seal that with the Lens game. So we're 4 points clear. We've got a bit of breathing room, so we want to go out, get those 3 points. And I think the reality is, against Lens, it was two absolutely super goals that beat us. And I think we were heavily hit by Saka's injury. I think there would have been a mental side to that as well. But Saka went down because it's so unusual not to have him in the team. But with Jesus and Odegaard back in the team, I completely agree with you about that. Jesus kind of, he's got it. It's the chaos. I think what he gives is a real unpredictability for defenders. It is that, should I put my foot in? Should I go for that ball? Because there's just that, he's just got that zip about him, that real hunger that I'm going to get there before you. And in some ways, that is one of his weaknesses as well as his biggest strength, because I think sometimes when he goes through on goal, he plays with that same like intensity and zip, and kind of ferocity when sometimes he needs to just take a breather before he shoots and so on. But it's possibly why he does pick up so many injuries as well, because there is that kind of 10 minutes left of a game. Other players are playing at walking pace, seeing it out. He's still chasing down every loose ball, and the ball goes long. He's going to head first to try and win it. So I think he's just one of those really honest players that you want in your team. He gives everything, but Odegaard's very similar in that sense.
The Brazilian in him.
Yeah, well, the Brazilians are funny because you've got one side, and then you've got the samba, which is like, I'm going to walk around for a while, and but yeah, he's definitely the kind of the feistier side, and so yeah, I think with those two back, and especially when you look at the games coming up, I think if we can get that kind of connection back within the team, Brentford is going to be a really tough game, but in the past, when they've given us trouble, it's been when Tony's been on the pitch, and he won't be available. So
True.
It's going to be a different game to what we've experienced with them before. And it's one of those. I think the key thing is taking it serious, not going into it expecting a win before we've kicked the ball. Do that. It's a tough game. It's one of those where they've got a good side. Thomas Frank's a very, very good coach. But at the same time, we should have more than enough to beat that Brentford team. And there's a lot of players they've got that I like. I really like Mbuemo and a few others in the side. But look, with our team back, provided we don't pick up any injuries during this break, I think we've got more than enough to win it. And then we've got some fairly favourable fixtures coming up after that. So obviously the Lens game, which I've touched on, but Wolves at home. Wolves are a very well coached side. Gary O'Neill's a really good manager, but they don't have the quality in it, and I think that's the key thing.
Especially without
you
Neto.
can be as well coached as you want, but I think it's one of those. Being well coached is important, but people sometimes think that substitutes not having quality on the pitch, and that only gets you so far. And I think if we go out and play our game, and then Luton, I mean, they're a truly woeful side. So it's a game that we need to go out and really make a marker like we did against Sheffield and use these games. I know some fans say they don't care about goal difference. Look, for me, goal difference, very important, but also the impact that has on confidence as well. You go out and win 5-0, it lets everyone know that you're still scoring goals right at the end of the game. And look, nothing builds confidence like scoring goals. So that's
when you look at the
definitely
game after. If we can go against Luton 5-0, Aston Villa are going to be like, do you know what I mean? If we struggle against a Luton, that's going to give Aston Villa defenders a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's all about the confidence game and goal difference. I mean, you go back to the Aguero. You know what I mean? Like there's been titles won and lost on goal difference. Won and lost
100%.
on goal difference, especially when you've got the cities scoring goals, plenty of goals. You need to keep up. You need to keep honest. And I think when I used to play American football, I used to have a coach, and we were by far the best team in the country. We were by far the best team. But he always used to tell us when you used to play like these teams that are bad, we used to beat them like 100+0. But he would always go, show them the respect and play them like you should. Do not drop down to their level. Show them the respect and play them like you would normally play anyone. Don't drop down to level, because that's when you make the mistakes. That's when you lose games. That's when you get injuries. Just play your game, play honest, and don't drop down to the level. So I think that's just something we've got to do. And it leads up for those games coming up with the Aston Villas and Liverpools and such. So I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's one of those, with more players coming back, they're going to be hungry to show and win their place back. I think Jesus is at a point where Trossard scored back-to-back goals for us, and there's players performing. So I think Odegaard walked straight back in. I don't think anyone stepped up in his absence. But at the same time, I think there's enough there that people still have to come back in and lay down a marker. Look, even if it's not so much like fighting to get their place back, it's more making a marker. I'm back. This is my place. You're not taking it, kind of thing. And that's what top players do. But So we've talked a lot about Havertz already, but Declan Rice has lit up the Emirates since he's signed. I think that's completely fair to say. And he's someone that's done very well both at left eight and as a six. But the other player, and I really don't think we need to go into Rice because I don't think he's dropped below an eight in any
Yeah,
game
it's
he's played for
self-explanatory.
us. He just we could talk all day about how good he is, and I honestly don't see much in his game that he needs to improve on right now that
Improve.
isn't that you're not seeing every week. So we're seeing a
There's a
better
reason he's one of
selection
the
of
most
passes.
valuable midfielders in the world. Him and Jude Bellingham are the most valuable midfielders in the world, and Musiala. There's a reason he's that valuable, and there's a reason why we
100%.
bought him for 105 million, and no one's mentioned it because he's
Yeah,
that good.
exactly.
He's worth it.
You
He's
know
worth
something.
every penny.
I think that's all we need to say on him. I think you've summed it up perfectly. But the one player I do want to ask you about
Mm-hmm.
is David Raya. He had a very, very good game against Burnley, made a couple of very
Mm-hmm.
important saves. But I think we've had a kind of a whirlwind and a bit of a circus over the last couple of months. It's clear he is Arteta's man, and for me, we have to back him. I love Ramsdale as much as the next person. I was very vocal about Ramsdale over the last two seasons. However, ultimately, I want whoever's playing to do the best job on the pitch. So let's focus on Raya rather than talking about Ramsdale. And what do you think Raya needs to do now to kind of really win over the fans? And not just win over the fans, but I guess really show himself as being the keeper that Arteta has built all this trust in and has,
Yeah.
I would say, gambled quite a bit on too.
No, I think it's a good question. See, with David Raya, like you look at his like clean sheets, he's got one of the highest clean sheets. I don't necessarily think that's down to him. I think that's because of the back line and Rice and Gabriel and Saliba, and we can talk all day about that. The thing about Raya, he does the job to the T. He does the job to the T. Whereas Ramsdale maybe sort of does his own little thing every now and again. And Raya will just do what he is told to the T. But what I think is missing, because we can talk all day about Raya, Ramsdale should go in or whatever. We could do all that all day. But I think for me, if I want to truly back Raya like we do Ramsdale, because he needs to be more confident in what he does off the ball. Like the reason I know the reason I love Ramsdale is because he is so shithouse with the away fans. He literally enjoys it. He enjoys it. He riles them up. He's funny. Do you know what I mean? He's confident in everything that he does. He just oozes class. I remember the one thing I loved about him the most is when we did the pre-season with the MLS All Stars, and we had that penalty shootout thing, that super game thing, that skill game, and they literally asked him. So it was him and Matt Turner at that time. Raya wasn't at the club, and they asked him who would win out of you or Matt Turner, and he straight up said with pure confidence, he was like, "Oh, I'll win." It was like no chance. It was like I'll absolutely smash it. I'll wipe the floor with him. And it's just those things because you want a keeper to be confident. Like you need to have a confident keeper because it gives the defenders confidence. And I feel like sometimes when Raya gets the ball, he doesn't look confident. He might be confident in his own skill, but he doesn't look it. And it kind of worries me sometimes on the ball when he's got it. I'm like, whoa, is he going to do it? Whereas Ramsey on his feet, you're never worried about it. You're never worried about it because he oozed the class, he oozed the confidence, he can pepper the ball long and far. And there were moments, there's been moments with both of the players. And I don't think each one of them is better than the other. I think they're both top quality
I
goalkeepers
agree with
who
that.
can both do good jobs. But I think the main thing is it's purely how it looks. And I mean, I've been in the stands where Ramsdale has been there, and he engages with the fans. He gets the fans to behind him, that they adore him, and then he really riles up the away fans. He takes it all to stick because what it does is it minuses the attention that the defenders get, because he absorbs it all. He absorbs it all for them, and because he riles them up and they target him, so it kind of riles the defenders up because they're like, don't have a go at my goalkeeper. Do you know what I mean? So he brings a lot more into it in that space, but I think they're both just as good as each other. So if we had to talk about the impact in terms of the team, I don't think Raya's actually done that much. I think he's been good. I think he's been solid and he's done a job, but I think Ramsdale could have done the same job. Um, I just think he could have done the same job. And for me, like I said, he's just got to add that little bit to him. What about you? Is there anything else that you can really sort of see that he might need to add or do?
No, I've been fairly consistent in what I've said is that I don't believe Raya is a better keeper than Ramsdale. I don't believe Ramsdale. At the end of the season, I said Ramsdale was a better keeper than Raya. But I think you're talking fine margins. And I think the thing that's keeping Raya in the team right now is that he will carry out exactly what Arteta wants. So for me, it's a case of, I think, cutting out some of the mistakes we've seen, getting that confidence up. And I agree with you about kind of stamping his authority. And hopefully that'll come. He's had a couple of good performances. But one thing that I wanted to ask you was his positioning with crosses. So he does have the best numbers at collecting. His aerial cross win percentage is exceptionally high, but a large part of that's down to his aggressive starting position. Now, we've seen Mudrik's cross go straight into the back of the net. Mudrik says they were told to do it. However, his eyes say differently when he looks up to cross that ball. However, the Newcastle goal as well, I know there's all the controversy around it, but Raya's position for that is very poor, and he leaves himself exposed, and ultimately they score.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it should have been a goal or not, before we get to the kind of foul on Gabriel, the handball by Joe Linton, or the offside, Raya is still beaten in the air. That ball is straight over his head. So is that a concern for you, or is that a trade-off that we make? A bit like playing out from the back, where you think we've got an aggressive keeper that could be lobbed. However, the chances of doing that in a game are very low, in the same way as the chances of a good ball-playing keeper conceding goals from playing out.
Yeah, I think it's a case of I don't mind Raya being aggressively positioned, but I think when you look back at that cross, especially the Newcastle one, it's about the situation and what you're in. If there was, say, a player in front of him and a player behind him, sure, play that position because you've marked both. Both of the players that were in the box were behind him quite a bit. They were at the back post. They were quite far behind him, and yet he's standing at the front post, and there's no one there at the back. He should have taken a good 3-4 steps back, stayed a little bit closer to the near post, and then he would have reached that ball. He would have reached that ball. He was maybe about 2 foot away from it, and he would have reached it if he just. They will come into his game. I hope that he does, and I'm sure the goalkeeper coaches and all the coaches would have had the game film and broke it down with him and said, look, you need to understand the situation of some games. Because I mean, I've said on the pod multiple times, Raya is better in the air. He is just better in the air than Ramsdale. Ramsdale will punch it, whereas Raya will just grab it. He will just take the ball and grab it, which is what I do like about Raya. Those aggressive positions, though, don't mind them as long as they're at the right time. And I just think he needs to add that sort of spatial awareness, just the purely game awareness of what is going on around him. Because I think when you look at that, he doesn't actually look at the attackers once. If I remember right, he didn't even look at them once. He didn't take one look behind to check where he was. And I think if he did that, he probably would have stepped back, but he didn't. So I think that's just not necessarily a trade-off. It's not a massive error. It's definitely one that can be tweaked and worked on. It's not like a fundamental thing where he just doesn't have. It's not like you're asking someone to spot passes that they've never spotted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because with that, you either got the vision or you don't. Whereas this, it's just purely a positional thing. It's just purely a positional thing and understanding game awareness. They can be coached and taught. Exactly. So I think he can kick on. He can be a great goalkeeper for us. But again, for me, I want to believe in him. I want him to do shithouse. Do you know what I mean? I want him to do that. That's what goalkeepers do. Goalkeepers are meant to be the funny guy of your team. That's their job. Effectively, they don't really have to work that much. They have to find something because I mean, they're not going to be able to concentrate for a full 90 minutes. They're a goalkeeper. They're not on the ball for 90 minutes. So they need to be able to rile up the crowd. They need to be able to speak and they need to be vocal and actively speaking. So with Ramsdale, especially, I remember when you would do counter attacks, he'd be shouting, he'd be like threatening, go, like literally. And then like on the defender, that when we were receiving things, he'd be shouting at players like, good job, guys, like good job, well covered. Raya does it a little bit, but not with the assertiveness. Whereas Ramsdale he actively communicates a lot with the back line, especially with the back line. He's so good at communicating with them. He'll be like, danger on the left, like Mark, he's coming through, and he'll like get Zinchenko on it, and he takes proactive parts on it. Whereas Raya, not so much. I think although he does Arteta's job, like you said, and I think he does it to the T. There are just moments where, I mean, Arteta's not infallible. He's not he's not Jesus, like reincarnated. Do you know what I mean? He makes mistakes. He's human. So there are just moments where he just needs to take his own and stamp his own style onto the game rather than just purely doing Arteta's word to word. That's the only thing I can really see, to be honest. But if he improves that, I'd love it.
Yeah, well, we have seen obviously the big strength of our defensive unit this season and what it's brought, but with our attacking options, we've missed Jesus a lot this season. Do you think that having him back now, and provided he can stay fit, so I think we've been fairly unlucky. The first one was a clean-up operation on his knee, which it is quite common for that kind of injury after surgery and so on. We had Dr. Raj on the pod in the summer, and he kind of talked a bit about that procedure and how common it is after an injury like that. But the next one was a hamstring injury that looked fairly innocuous and has kept him out longer than expected. But the question is with Jesus is, how long can he stay fit for? If he stays fit, in my opinion, we don't need another striker. But if he is not able to stay fit, and say he picks up another injury in the next month or so, even if it's only a kind of a muscular injury that keeps him out 3 to 4 weeks, that would be a third of the season. Does that force Arsenal's hand in January and make the club think we either need to invest in Havertz, say, as a striker and really go and buy that left eight, or we go and buy an actual striker and we put the money down for someone like Ivan Toney? But what are your thoughts on that?
I think both of the options are great, really. I think there's cases to be made for both of those, getting a striker or a left eight. I think realistically, we have to look at how the market plays out. So I'm hearing a lot about sort of the Pedro Netos. We know Pedro Neto is a fantastic player and he is their sole creator for Wolves. But because of that, it's going to be extremely difficult to get him out of a Wolves team who need him, who literally need him to stay in the league effectively. Because when they don't have him, they're a very different team. So those ones are quite hard. Ivan Toney can be done. It's just a case of there might be bidding wars and stuff, and we obviously don't want to overpay for Toney. He's old. He's not old, but he is getting onto the latter years of his prime. So we don't want to overspend on that. Then you go to the putting Havertz up front. I mean, do we get the left eight? Now, that's one I would rather prefer because I know Nketiah can do the job. And I know Jesus, when he comes back, he will also do the job. And Havertz, he can potentially do it. We might as well try it. And if not, we know Nketiah can step in and do it. Left eight, that is one we are missing because we know Havertz can't do it. Emil Smith-Rowe hasn't been tested enough to do it. And if he hasn't been tested enough, it's probably down to he's not training well enough. Probably. Don't know, but that's probably it. So that is probably, for me, the most important position in January. And when you look at the options of what we can get, I mean, like, for instance, a player that I know both of us really like is Zubamendi. Can we get him out mid-season? Probably not. Because he's probably the most vital player for Real Sociedad. And they're having an all right season, and they're going to need him throughout. Then you've got Douglas Luiz. Douglas Luiz is pivotal for Aston Villa. Thing. Yeah, because Aston Villa, like you said earlier in the pod, they're not like the Brighton. Aston Villa have a genuine project. They are a sleeping giant. Whether you want to banter Aston Villa for being crap for what they want, they are a massive, massive club. They are a huge club with a massive amount of history, and they've been a sleeping giant for a good 30, 40 years now. And it's about time that they actually started becoming serious again. And they're unlike the Brightons. They're not trying to buy cheap. They're trying to buy players, keep them, and they're doing kind of what we were like 5 years ago, buying that player who's not quite on that level for the big clubs to be getting them, but they are definitely got the potential to be good enough to play for them, and that's what they've done. They bought in players. They bought in like the Tielemans, who could play in pretty much. I think he could play in pretty much any team. Douglas Luiz, he was created. They bought him the other season. They got Kamara. They got Musa Diaby, who a lot of teams were going after. This you as a club, you don't go buy Musa Diaby if you're not serious, because it came for quite a bit of money, and they bought him very early on, very, very, very early on. So they're a very well organised club. They did a lot of their transfers early. I think the only way we get Douglas Luiz out is if we give him an offer they can't say no to. Whether that's possible, I don't know, in January. So thinking that January market, it might be a case of loans. It might just be a loan, and then we have to look out in for the summer. And again, if it's a case of we have to loan a striker, then we keep Havertz on that left eight. If it's a case of a perfect number 8 becomes available in a loan or a transfer, then we probably don't get the striker. I don't see us getting 2 players in January.
Neither do I.
But we'd like to see it. We can dream, we can hope. But again, I think it's just how the market plays out, because again, there could be injuries coming up. There's all sorts. You just never know. Never know.
100%. And I
what about you? Your thoughts on it?
I like the idea of Ruben Neves on loan. I'm reluctant to bring in someone, and I have this every year in January, sign in someone for a big fee that's not our first choice or our second choice. You will miss out on your first choice targets, but the kind of, you want to be able to position yourself that you go into the summer window to go and buy the best player that you can. And we did that in January last year. We went out, we bought Jorginho, perfect backup, bought Trossard, again, another perfect squad player, plays multiple positions. And then we moved, Kivior's moved forward because apparently that was going to be done in the summer. But those 3 meant that we were still able to buy who we wanted in the summer, because all 3 of them cost, I think, less than 50 million combined, or maybe just over. Yeah. So, I wouldn't be against us bringing in maybe a young player and a loan for a Ruben Neves or someone like that to enable us to go out and buy our top choice, our target in the summer. Because I think next summer is going to be really interesting, because the holes in the side that we have
after we
this
win
year,
the league,
100%. But yeah, the kind of areas that we knew we needed to address this year aren't quite there. So it's more adding those top levels of quality. So I don't want to see us go out and spend money on someone that we don't have a long-term vision for. And that's why getting like a Neves on loan
100%.
is intriguing to me. He's a good player. He's proven in the league. We've wanted him before. I just don't see us getting a Pedro Neto, for example, because, and also his injury record terrifies me. So it's one of those for me. Let's keep an eye on January. I also wouldn't be surprised if we signed someone completely left field that none of us were expecting, and it kind of, we get an iron bomb on like the 13th of January or something, like random mid-month, and it's just like, where did that come from? So we just don't know. But finally, before we wrap up, we've got 4 league games before the PSV game. So our next 4 games, we've got Brentford, Wolves, Luton, and Villa. I'm leaving out the Lens game because I want to be arrogant and fully expect us to get 3 points. But how many points do you think we will accumulate from our next 4 league games? So Brentford, Wolves, Luton, and Villa.
I'm going to be optimistic. I would expect 12. I think the Wolves game will be tighter than what people expect. I don't expect us to slap them 4-0. I think that might be a 2-1, a frustrating game. Luton, like you said earlier, I expect a statement. I just think we're just better than them. We're just purely better than them. And they can low block as much as they want. They don't have the players to frustrate. I don't see it. And I know they've tried to do it with Tottenham's and eventually they've all just been found out in every game. Aston Villa is definitely a more even game. And obviously against Unai Emery, it's going to have a little bit of heat to it. I think we come out of that game with a win. I would be surprised if we don't. But I also wouldn't be too surprised if it was a draw. I think to lose that game would be huge. And I understand that we are away at Villa Park. And Villa have been really good at home. But when I look at our back line, I don't see how the likes of McGinn, Watkins, Diaby break it. I don't see it because Watkins isn't the tallest. He's not the strongest. McGinn, again, low centre of gravity. I can see Rice dominating him. Moussa Diaby, he's quick, sure. He might give Zinchenko a game. That's why, personally, for that game, I'd put like a Tomiyasu there because 1-on-1,
100%.
I don't see Diaby beating Tomiyasu. I don't see him beating him. So I'm going to be optimistic and say 12 points. I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing and a clean 12 points where it's clean sheet, smack them, clean sheet. I think the only one that we might convincingly beat them will be that Luton game. And then the rest, especially that Wolves and Aston Villa game, I think they'll be tougher. I think they'll be a lot tougher, and they will be telling, especially Aston Villa game for the upcoming month.
Yeah, one of the interesting things.
What about you? What were your predictions?
I agree with you, and for the Villa game, what's very interesting is before that game, so Villa have Spurs at the weekend, then they've got a Europa game and against Legia Warsaw, then they play Bournemouth away, then City at home, followed by us. So they've got a really tough month coming up. So right now they're in a purple patch, and which is probably a harsh term.
Beat Spurs, beat City, lose to us.
That's the perfect month. So it's one of those. I think we will know a lot more about Villa if. Let's see how they do over the next month before we play them, and hopefully we're going into that with 9 points, not having to chase a win, because the last thing we want to be doing is going to Villa Park with our tails between our legs and really having to get at them to try and prove a point. But yeah. With that, we will wrap up the show. So thank you to everyone that's listened up to this point. If you have enjoyed the show, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you want more of the Arsenal Therapy, we will be on YouTube at the Arsenal Therapy channel. On Tuesday, we'll have the 15-minute show. And on Friday, we will once again be back with a preview show ahead of the Brentford game. So thank you to everyone that's tuned in. And thank you to Monty for joining us today. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.